once you realize that like the creator is within all of us, and that we all have behind all of our thoughts and behind our emotions and even behind our body, like even within everything, we all have this one consciousness that's the same. Some people may just not want to have big goals. And I think part of that, I feel like everyone would if they like believed it could be possible. If you use it strategically and think of those negative things that happen, you won't be as surprised when they do. He just uploaded first one. He just uploaded it days ago, and then I did this other one with this dude named Glass from New York. Dude, I like podcasts though. I was like nervous at first when I first did these, but it's not like we're doing it live in front of a bunch of people, and it's also like just a conversation. It's not like some high pressure thing. It's like it's really chill.
Yeah, I mean, it's literally like what you said, just a conversation. You know what I mean? People do this shit daily, whether it's recorded or not. You know what I mean?
And when I talk about shit that I love and shit I like to talk about, it's easy.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure.
You have a question. I do cuss a lot. I don't know if you care about cussing. I don't like.
Off limits, bro.
Okay, cool.
I'm just kidding, bro. It's just be you. That's all I want. That's all I want from people. Like when they come on, just hey, like if you cuss, fuck it, I'm gonna cuss too. You know what I mean?
I like it.
That's what's up, man. All right, well, this is Drew Ford, everybody, whoever's listening and tuning in, and just tell us about yourself, man.
Well, I'm 24. I started making content about personal development about like 3 months ago. I've been addicted to personal development since I graduated high school. I started the past 3 years. I've done door-to-door sales, managing teams. I've lived in Florida, Georgia, Indiana. I'm in California right now where I grew up. But I actually, the past year, I started saving up as much money as I could so I could go all in on my own business, start doing content full time, which is something we know that doesn't produce income right away. So I wanted to have like a good security background. And then, I just went all in on content. And my main goal is to just like, books and personal development have changed my life so much. And I consider myself just like one of the happiest people on the planet. And I just see so much suffering these days and like depression, anxiety, like all these things people are dealing with. And I want to help as many people as I can just get the right mindset about this life and just live the best life they can, pretty much.
That's awesome, because I definitely agree with you. We'll get to your content in a second, but I just want to talk about what made you want to even start making content. I mean, obviously in high school, we kind of see people online making content, and maybe this was you, but sometimes that's almost a pipe dream, you know what I mean? Like people don't have that. It's not a realistic thing. Like your parents would tell you, like, go pursue something else, you know what I mean? Or go to college, get a degree, and, kind of climb that corporate ladder. But for yourself, what made you said, hey, I'm just going to go in on this content creator stuff and just believe that I can do it? What made you?
So I had that same kind of upbringing where like my parents were never married and I grew up more with my mom. Everyone in my family has always gone to college. Everyone has college degrees. And throughout high school, when it was like getting ready to go to college, my mom, when she realized that I wasn't, thankfully I was blessed with a dad who was like that entrepreneur mindset, right? And that's what I've always looked up to. And all the people that I aspire to be like have their own businesses. They live the life they want, right? The freedom that they have. I always wanted. So my dad, thankfully, he guided me and he told me, like, college, if you really want to go that route, like, it's probably not the best option. You can do sales, you can just start doing stuff right away, right? You don't have to go get a business degree or whatever. So I was lucky in that sense, as to have like the guidance to just take risks and just send things. Um, but yeah, my mom was actually so shocked by it. Like, she, right when I graduated, she actually kicked me out of the house because she said, like, if I wasn't going to college, then like you have to start paying rent. Like, I'm not going to support you, blah blah blah. And I was like lazy. Even in high school, I was super lazy. I never wanted to get like normal jobs, even though when I look back, I probably should have. But I just like never wanted the 9 to 5 job. Like, it was just so like, I don't know. I just like refused. And I did. I worked at the only job I've ever had like that. I worked at Wendy's for like 2 weeks, and then and me and my dad moved to Asia for like this crazy job. Like, it was really cool. But anyways, it was hard for me too. When starting to make content, it's super hard. Like, being judged is one of the hardest thing to let go of. Right? Other people's opinions, like, it's a daily practice you need to cultivate to not care what people think. And I was
Hmm.
so scared when I started making content, like, because at the beginning, all the people that follow you are people you know, right? From high school and from your entire life. So when they start seeing you put yourself out there, it's like a very vulnerable state. So it was super like embarrassing for me too. But I just knew I just had to. I literally, before I started making content, I literally made a pros and cons list of like,
Mm.
make content, why I shouldn't make content, and like the cons, they were like I said, vulnerable, massive amount of judgment, like putting yourself out there. But then the pros, it just outweighed all of them, right? It was just like being able to impact millions of people through like positive thinking and like having access to high value men, high value women, um, and like following your passions, not having a cap on the money you make, and like I just sensed it. And it's like any other fear, right? Like, when you attack it, the best way to kill a fear is by attacking it, right? So like,
Mm.
as soon as I started posting and talking on the camera, after a few days, it was easy for me. And it was like, okay, it's not scary. And
Yeah,
and then once I started getting traction, it just becomes easier and it just reinforces like those beliefs. So that's really
absolutely.
that's what made me like send it on the
I
content
love
side.
it. I love it, man. And before we started recording, we were talking about how you asked me, when did I start my podcast? And I told you, it was last year when I was living in the Bay Area. And something you just said now about putting yourself out there, about the vulnerability, the fear of being judged, that was definitely one of the reasons why I wasn't as consistent in the beginning.
100%.
And it definitely is a scary feeling because the people that you feel like, oh, like I feel like they would be inspired by this. I feel like they would really fuck with my content. And then you put yourself out there and you're like, oh, it's kind of like crickets, you know what I mean? And it's like, oh shit, like, is this the right move for me? I'm sure you've been there, you know what I mean? And it's a terrible and sucky feeling. But I think, you coming from an entrepreneurial dad, I think there's something innately in everyone who has that entrepreneurial spirit where you're like, no, this is like what I'm supposed to do. I'm like, you just kind of know, you know what I mean? And I and
Yeah.
I and I believe you have that feeling too. And maybe I'm just, assuming or whatever. But I feel like that's who you have, what you have inside of you. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And you get a lot of those perspectives when you like, I'm sure all of us have seen some of those videos of like elderly people when they like are in like assisted livings and they like talk about the regrets of their life and they talk about the life they've lived. Like, you would just hear over and over that the regrets always outweighed like the risks, right? Like, they
Mm-hmm.
always, regret was always just a more painful feeling for people than than taking the risk. They always said, "Oh, I wish I would have just done it." Like, no one, the judgment at the end of the day, you're gonna get it, but it doesn't matter. And so like I would just keep seeing things like that, and I just knew like you, it's like so cliche, but like you
Yeah.
only, and it's like, dude, you just got to send it. And
Yeah.
what I'll say about that, Matt, about just the fear, like, one of the biggest perspective switches I had about fear, I I had this like epiphany moment when I was reading the book called The Way of the Superior Man,
Mm.
um, which I think every dude should read, but it talked about fear, and it gave me the perspective of like, it's basically what makes everything worth it, right? If there was no fear, if it was easy, it wouldn't be worth it, right? And so when I thought about it, if we didn't even have fear inside us to post, if we didn't have fear inside us to approach that girl or take a risk, start a business, quit our job, like life would be so freaking boring. Like the whole like reason life is fun, this game of life that we play is because we have fear in the first place. And it's about the courage to like overcome it. Because like if that wasn't even there, this shit wouldn't even be fun. Like it wouldn't be satisfying at all. So like once you change that mindset and you become grateful for fear, like that's when your life starts to change, and all those moments where you get the butterflies in your stomach, you realize like, oh, this is like the good part of life, and you like attack it and you like get over it.
I love it. Yeah, fear. It's funny because fear is one of those emotions that you experience in life, and it's it could be perceived as negative. But I love the way you illustrated how it can actually play to your advantage, because without fear, life doesn't really have texture. You know what I mean? I think everyone wants to have this idea that life should always be, you know, blissful, and you should always feel all the good feelings, all the positive emotions. But it's like that's not that doesn't make life life. You know what I mean? You have to experience the ups and downs to appreciate both. You know what I mean? And I love the way you illustrated that
and
so
it and it,
so beautifully.
it makes complete sense too, because like fear has changed because of the society that we're in now. Like fear used to be that negative thing, right? It had to be, because it was like the fear of death. It was the fear of like the saber-toothed tiger killing you, or like you getting rejected in your like tribe and having to survive on your own, right? But now that we live obviously in a society where death isn't like a major problem, like we live obviously in a safe society, so our fear is like hardwired in our mind that we are gonna die. Like that's the feeling, that's why it's so scary. But when you obviously realize that like approaching that girl or taking a risk, you're not gonna die, then you can, yeah, shift your perspective and really like take advantage of that feeling, and that's like it's the best feeling.
It is, man. Overcoming fear is definitely one of those things that you're going to be glad that you did it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you almost get like high from it, you get like an adrenaline rush from it.
Absolutely. I was talking with one of my friends yesterday, and I was telling him about like kind of like the he knows the type of person I am, and he knows like I have all these goals, and I'm trying to accomplish um, financial freedom. You know what I mean? I think that's something that everybody would like to have, right? Financial freedom, and maybe people don't. But for me, I sincerely believe that financial freedom is one of the ways you can break out of this, matrix. You know what I mean? So you don't have to work that job that you hate or work at a place that doesn't really value your life. You know what I mean? When you achieve financial freedom, I sincerely believe that's when you can start, um, you know, actually creating a beautiful life. Not that you can't do it without finances, but it definitely does help when money is not one of those hurdles you have to jump over. You know what I mean? How do you go? How First of all, let me ask you what your thoughts on about that. Like, what do you think about that?
Oh, I think it's one of the most important things. So like what I've realized about what true wealth is, and I learned this from the book The Millionaire Fast Lane. And it's something, sometimes things are like kind of obvious, but we don't think about them. They're either like cliche where it like goes over our head, or we just don't like, we just forget. And it reminded me of what true wealth really was. And it came down to the three F's. And the first one is family and friends, right? Like all your relationships, right? The second one is fitness and your health, because without health you have nothing. And then the last one is the freedom, right? The like being able to do what you want to do, right? And not being a slave to a job, not being a slave to anything. And so I think financial freedom is what is what like puts these three into perspective. And sometimes people forget. Sometimes people think it's only money, like only
Mm-hmm.
money, and then they'll start risking their freedom. They'll start doing illegal things to like gain money when the real wealth is freedom. So like people forget that. So I agree 100%. That's one of my biggest goals, to become financially free, to live my best life, you know?
Absolutely. How do you balance that with also, staying present and enjoying the moment? Because I think I've definitely, this is one of my challenges right now as well. I get so fixated on like, you know, oh, when I have this, you know, then I'll be happy. And I think a lot of people are there too. And it's something that I'm aware of within myself, but I think my friend pointed it out yesterday, and he was like, "Hey, man, like you have, this car. Not a lot of people have this car. Be happy that you have this car." And that's something like I know, like I'm super grateful. You know what I mean? But sometimes you forget. How do
Yeah.
you how do you find that balance personally?
So I think the most important key to that is, like you said, gratitude, right? It's just being thankful for those moments, like, and knowing that one of the most common cliche sayings that you've probably heard, I've heard from a million successful people, is it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. So when I always pay attention to those little sayings that I hear constantly, and I listen to them. And when I hear, oh, money isn't happiness, I've heard that a million times, and I believe it. I believe it. Like, I believe there's many people who have gained massive amounts of money that still aren't happy because they don't focus on the family, fitness, and freedom, right? But gratitude is my most important like habit that I've cultivated, and just constantly remind myself every single morning, right when my eyes open. I've been doing it for so long that my body is like hardwired to, like, right when my eyes are opening, I'm like praying and thanking God, like, for my life, for this day. One of my favorite perspectives that I got from Brad Lee. Do you know Brad Lee?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Dude, he's one of my favorites. And one of the things, he's made a bunch of videos on it, and it's what he says about how, like, waking up is worth more than any amount of money that you could get.
Mm,
For you $1 million right now, or to wake up tomorrow, like, what are you going to choose? To
I
wake up?
saw that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, why isn't your perspective on waking up? Why aren't you, like, if you got $1 million, you would be geeked. Like, you would just be hyped. And,
Mm-hmm.
like, waking up without that same energy, there's just no rational reason as to why you wouldn't. And it's hard when we have a lot of problems and all these like issues, but when you really realize that, like, the yin and yang of life and the balance of it, and like how the good makes the, or the bad like makes the good makes the bad, like, and everything goes together, it just keeps you grateful at all times. And like, that's what really keeps me like satisfied. You have to
Mm-hmm.
be like unsatisfied to like hit your goals, but you have to be satisfied with everything you've already got. It is
Yeah.
to have sometimes.
Absolutely. What are what were some of the biggest challenges that you've had to overcome? Just kind of in your personal journey, being 24 years old, what were some of the biggest challenges, that you had to overcome?
Um, One of them was, so when I graduated, like I said, so when I graduated, my mom kicked me out of the house because I didn't want to go to college and I didn't want to pay her rent. So I went to go live with my dad, in like a few cities over, like a little bit. It wasn't super far, but we moved in. Something my dad has always done ever since he lost a crazy amount of wealth in 2007, from a bank scandal. He used to be very wealthy, and there was a bank scandal. We had everything stolen. It was a crazy story.
Mm,
On our like way up, something he's always done is rent out houses and then subleased rooms to pay for his rent, right, and make a little money on top. So that's something we did multiple times, over the years. And when I went to go live with them, we rented our biggest house. It was this 10-bedroom house with 18 people living in it. And at first we were supposed to like start with a clean slate, kick everyone out of the house, and like get all of our own tenants. But something ended up happening where we just kind of moved in. We were like now the like landlords of the other 18 people living in the house, and it was very ghetto. The other 18 people were not the most stand-up people or trustworthy people. But one of the hardest challenges I went through is when my grandma, she got sick. She lives in Idaho, my dad's mom, and my dad had to go take care of her. And so all of a sudden, I'm 18 years old, living in this house with 18 people that are all older than me. And I brought my best friend to live with me, and all of a sudden we're the landlords, and we have to collect rents, and we have to like be the boss of all these people. And like there were so many different stores. Like we were robbed by our own like tenants. Like we had to like literally throw things out of like this room to get this guy out who was like
Oh my
squatting.
gosh.
There was just so many different scenarios where like the cops were called so many times, and I was just young, and that's when I really started learning about what real life was. Like when you're growing up through middle school, high school, you're kind of just in this like kid land, and then when you get into the adult world, you start realizing like about drugs, about like all these crazy people and crazy things going on. And that's actually when one of the ways. Are you religious at all?
Not really, no.
Me neither.
I believe there is a God though.
Okay, so we're in a similar boat. I'm not religious at all, but I believe in God, and that was the year where I made a decision, Matt, because like I said, I grew up with a mom and dad who never married. I grew up more with my mom, who was like an atheist. My dad was like a Christian, but I didn't believe in God the first 18 years of my life. When all that shit started going down, though, there was no one to help me. I was by myself. I was going, yes, and I made a decision. I was like, if in my head, I was like, if God isn't real, then it doesn't matter. We all die. Nothing happens. Who cares? It was all. If he is real, apparently you ask him for stuff, he gives it to you. And I was completely selfish at the time. I was like, I want him on my team. If this God is real, like I'm gonna start stuff, and like might as well. And so like that's when I just made a decision I wanted to believe in God, and that's kind of what got me over it. It took me like 3 years before I actually like flipped and actually had 100% faith just from like prayers being answered and all this crazy stuff. But yeah, that was one of the hardest obstacles I've had to overcome, just managing a house of 18 crazy people and like collecting rent.
Wow, that is wild because I can only imagine how challenging that was being 18 years old, and probably a lot of the tenants are older than you, and then they're probably thinking like, who's this kid thinking that he can just take my money? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
That sounded like a very interesting experience, to say the least.
I'm grateful for it. It taught me a lot.
I'm sure, yes. And I remember watching one of your TikToks. You had talked about how the 4 agreements. I think you were talking to your mom about it, and you just mentioned she is an atheist. I haven't read that book, but I've heard it been talked about in a lot of self-development circles. And that book, I remember, if I'm recalling it correctly, you said in the beginning it talks about how you are God. Am I correct on that?
Yes. If I remember correct, I'm trying to remember the exact thing, but yeah, it does basically say that. If you want, Matt, you have to just read the first 10 pages of it.
Oh, really?
The whole book is amazing. It talks about all the agreements, everything.
Yeah.
But the introduction of the book goes into, basically that we are all God. We're all one. And like, we are the like physical manifestation of like a godly being. Like, yeah.
That's kind of what I wanted to harp on anyways, was how, because that's a crazy statement to say that. I remember when Kanye first said that, everyone was fucking coming for him, you know what I mean?
Wait, who first said that?
Kanye, when he was like, I am a God.
That
was like the first time, remember, like when I think he dropped Jesus and he was like, I am a God, and then people were just like, they were coming for him, and that's like the first time something crazy like that was said. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think he was onto something, obviously, because now all these self development circles are kind of talking about that idea and concept of that we are all gods. And that's something that does resonate with me because if you really sit down and think about it, we, to our knowledge, are the only beings on this planet that can think, speak, and create. You know what I mean? And what you don't have to be a Christian to know like who God is. What did God do? He is the creator of the universe, right?
Exactly.
And so I just wanted to see your thoughts on that. Like what how does that statement what does that statement mean to you that we are all gods?
Dude, when I I like that question because when I first heard that statement, I thought it was the most arrogant thing I've ever heard because God is just this like being that's not human. It's like created the entire universe, and when we call ourselves God, it's almost like this offensive, like how. Okay, yeah. So when I first heard it, I thought saying that I am God is the most arrogant thing you could possibly say to anyone. But when you really start to dive into it, the religious God is like this guy with a white beard in the sky that created everything and is like the guy you like worship, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like the spiritual God, the true God to me is like the energy, the vibration, the basically the universe itself. And like you said, like we're the only beings on this planet that have a consciousness like we do, right? Like every animal has a subconscious, right? Just like the reactions, the habits. Um, but no other animal has the creative consciousness that we do where we can think about our thoughts. We can get anxiety, we can get depression because we have the ability to think about our thoughts. So once you realize that like the creator is within all of us and that we all have behind all of our thoughts and behind our emotions and even behind our body, like even within everything, we all have this one consciousness that's the same, and it's basically just structured because of the physical reality of our different bodies and our different experiences of where we grew up and the society and all that stuff. But deep down we're all like this one same consciousness, and I feel like, and I agree with all those statements that like we are God, we're like half animal half godly beings because we can create whatever we want. And once I started, I haven't read a ton of the Bible, obviously a bunch of the verses have come up in my life. They're just through different mediums, but
Mm-hmm.
you start to realize that not everything is literal. And when it says like, as so in heaven as it is on earth, like I agree with all the statements that mean like our reality is created in our mind and that we are living heaven on earth. It's
Mm-hmm.
not a separate place. It's like everything is created in our mind. And it's hard. It starts to get deep with like all the different things, but I believe it 100%.
Yeah, that's. I didn't tell you this before we started recording, but I did spend time like a part of the Christian community. I was Christian for like about 5 years of my life. I actually grew up predominantly in a Buddhist family, but we didn't necessarily follow it religiously. But I say all that to say that when I was part of the Christian community and I was reading the Bible, coming out of it now, yeah, it's like you said, like everything is not as literal as the Bible says. You know, the verse you just quoted, as it is in heaven, it is below. I agree with that because, what when I hear that statement, I've heard other people, talk about that statement. They're saying, whatever is going on up here in your head, you're gonna see it out here. You know what I mean? As above, so below. And so
Yes.
that's exactly what the statement I believe is trying to say. And this is a whole another discussion later, but I believe the Bible is uh, more metaphysical than it is like, you know, like I don't know what else to describe it, but it's more metaphysical than what it's been kind of perceived to be. And so
Dude,
it's kind of go for it.
no, I agree. And Dude, I like a lot of. You said you were raised like somewhat Buddhist and some Christianity or switch.
Yeah, so my family, the family culture from what I come from, a lot of Asians kind of grow up in like the Buddhist religion, and Buddha, like just like Christianity, Buddhism has many different like sects. And so I'm not exactly sure which one we were a part of, but we did grow up. We went to like a Buddhist temple.
Uh huh.
Um, I think every year for like our Lao New Year's. I'm Laotian, and I kind of broke out of that when I got with this girl in high school. Um, my ex and her family kind of introduced me to Christianity, and we started going to a church together. And um, but I remember like being a part of it, and I remember hearing the preacher preach. Um, I'm not necessarily a part of that church anymore, but I remember hearing him preach, and I was like, "This shit sounds like truth." You know what I mean? Like it was hitting good, and I was like, "There has to be something to it." You know what I mean?
I agree. And dude, I actually really like Buddhism a lot. My stepmom, she was Thai,
Mm-hmm.
so she's Buddhist. Um, and I like just a lot. I don't know a lot about the religion because I know there's a lot of just philosophies that I like about Buddhism that I think
Mm-hmm.
relate to everything in life. And I think there's a lot of philosophies in every religion
Mm-hmm.
that obviously relate to each other, but that you can pick from everything. The one thing that um, I've realized that bothers me about religion is that a lot of religions make God separate from us. And it's like heaven and God are this separate thing that we go to after afterlife and all this when in my opinion it's like we're always together. Like God is within all of us and like heaven is within all of us. And so that's just like the one variant in my opinion that like that I just believe, I guess.
Yeah, I remember when I first started going to church. I was, of course, the only one in my family who was doing that, and even in my friend group, you know what I mean. Like I was starting to kind of um, go taking a different path, if you will. You know what I mean? Like I even had the dream of opening my own church and being this pastor that was preaching and teaching and whatnot. Um, but kind of circling back to your journey of self development, when you started on this journey, um, did you notice a change in your friend group, or did you ever feel any friction about, you know, you see yourself, this is you, you're growing, and then you're noticing that like some of maybe the people that you ran with aren't necessarily there yet. Did you ever
Dude,
experience that?
100%. And the farther you get into it, the longer life goes, especially like after high school, the more you see it because I guess you're growing more. So the farther you like separate, right? But in high school, it's so easy because you're a kid and like everyone kind of is going through the same thing and you're all together. But right after high school is when you realize, or and it may be college for some people. I never went to college. But yeah, when you start to grow and realize the right mindsets for success and you have certain goals that other people, like you said, some people may just not want to have big goals. And I
Mm-hmm.
think part of that, I feel like everyone would if they like believed it could be possible. But I feel like a lot of people, a lot of like my old friends, they maybe don't care about success because they don't believe they can have it, which is just like everyone can do it. You just have to change your mindset. But 100%, you start to just notice more complaining, more excuses, more limitations that people set on themselves, and it's like, yeah, you just don't want to be around it. Like
Mm-hmm.
you learn about success and you learn about the right mindsets and happiness and how to live a good life. You realize that all these things like complaining and limitations and excuses like yeah, most of the time excuses are real. Like excuses are real. Most of the time, you still have a choice to overcome them and try and like get past them. But when people constantly talk about them, yeah, you have to separate yourself. That I think that's one of the most important. Another cliche saying: you become the five people you surround yourself with." I think it's so huge. And honestly, I've been blessed. My single most best friend, my brother, his name's Cash. Like, I met him in like third grade. And so I was so lucky to meet him because
Mm-hmm.
I've at least had one person by my side through all of our different friend groups that's
Mm-hmm.
had the same goals and had the same big like aspirations to where we can talk about money all the time. We can talk about like these desires we have. Whereas we've gone through so many different friend groups that we've had to let go just because they weren't on the same.
Mm.
But that's a good question.
That's very, you're very blessed to have that, because that's a challenge that to be vulnerable, that's the challenge that I'm experiencing right now is like, because I feel like, there's people that can see you on this path, and this is just me telling myself this, but I feel like they feel like I think I'm better than them. You know what I mean? When in reality, it's more like, hey, like, no, this is for you too. Come with me. Let's do this
Yeah.
together. You know what I mean? I want to hear your perspective on it. What do you tell somebody who kind of is experiencing that? Like they're trying to grow, but they necessarily don't want to cut people off like cold turkey. Like
Yeah,
how do you navigate that?
dude, I'm so glad you brought that up because that's such a good point. Like, I feel like that's one of the biggest detectors for people with like a small mindset where they almost get offended by you talking about aspirations you have or goals that you want to reach. And it's like, that's something I love about my friend group that I've noticed when we're in other circles or talking about that people get turned off. Where like people will automatically think it's arrogance or cockiness when you start to talk about cool things you've done or whatever. Whereas like when I'm with my boys and we're on the same wavelength, like, dude, why wouldn't you want to talk about the cool stuff you want to do, the cool stuff you've done? Like, um, and then there's certain people who like, yeah, automatically just shut it down. Like, dude, why are you like opening up about that? Like, they just want to
Mm,
talk about the normal, the excuses, all like the misery loves company, right? They love talking about
right.
that. But to answer your question, you said like, how do you? Are you asking like how to kind of get those people onto your mindset, or are you talking about how to cut people off? What was you?
Well, let's say you're in that position. Let's say you didn't have Cash, by your side doing this thing with you and,
Yeah.
supporting you on your journey. And you kind of feel like you're kind of stuck in this boat, you know what I mean, on your own. Like, what do you do?
So I would. So the people that I really cared about around me, I would first try and kind of open them up to these bigger mindsets, to the bigger goals. Like, what do you want? Like, figure out what you want. Like, what goals do you want to set? Like, how are we going to do it? Like, what plan are we going to make? But we both know some people just don't want to change. They don't want to grow as much as you like tell them. They just still have that negative mindset. And so, and obviously, it's the hardest with like family when people talk about how families are the ones bringing them down or limiting them, which sometimes you're just stuck with. But I do take that stuff seriously. And so things that I've done are just aligning myself with the people I do want to work with. So like when I went into sales, I think sales is that's one of the biggest pieces of advice I give younger people that are like, they don't want to go to college. They don't see themselves going to college or maybe coming out of college. They don't want to get the normal job. Like sales is that first step to where you don't have to start your own business, but you have that unlimited cap on your money where like you create the money in your life. Like you are the value, you produce whatever you're bringing to the table. It's not just an hourly wage. So when I joined sales, it put me into that environment where a lot of people had those goals of exceeding and excelling in life. And because it's hard, bro, it weeds out people that aren't about it. Like you take massive amounts of rejection. It's really hard, but you
Mm-hmm.
can make a lot of money. And so when I surrounded myself with those people at first I had to switch companies because I joined this one company. There was cool people, but the leader wasn't the most trustworthy. And it made me switch to this other company where like it's always a feeling, right? It's always
Mm-hmm.
felt this genuine trust and care that they had for me and my success, and that they didn't care about the money. The money was second, it was third, but like the most important thing was like impact. and like really the value. Um, and sometimes it takes years to like align yourself with those people, but yeah, you just have to put yourself in situations with people with the same goals.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's helpful because it could get very discouraging when you're trying to level up and your environment's almost like preventing you from doing so, right? And it's just like, dang, like this is I want to level up, but you know the situation that I find myself in, it's very challenging, and it could very much discourage somebody from even wanting to level up. You know what I mean? Like it's like, all right, what's the point if no one else is gonna hop on board? Then fuck it, I'm just gonna be with the crowd and go with them. Um,
It, bro, it's so hard to say no. Like, and one of the crazy dude, I watched like a YouTube video yesterday. I'm trying to think of the exact video. It was like a TED talk, but it was really eye opening because one thing he said was like, even though it's hard to say no, a lot of us are people pleasers. A lot of us like, not only do we not like taking rejection, but we don't like rejecting other
yeah,
people.
yeah,
But the perspective change that he said was like, when you say yes to something that you don't really want to do or someone you want to hang out with, you're still saying no, but it's just to your priorities, and you're
mm,
always saying no to something when you decide something, but like you just have to say no to the right things, right? And like
that's
you have to
huge.
prioritize goals. Yeah, I thought that was a really like eye-opening thing. I was like, holy crap, like yeah, because that's one of the hardest. That's one of the things Warren Buffett and Bill Gates say. That, like saying no, one of the hardest things to do and learn.
Yeah, definitely. People pleasing is a real struggle, and I think um, I just want I feel like you have to just really want it though. You know what I mean? Like, all right, like even if I get rejected, and that's what kind of put me over the edge. Just like I'm gonna go all in on this podcast. Like whether people like it or not, I'm doing it for myself. You know what I mean? Like I might not sound like the smartest or might be not be able to articulate my thought as well as some of these other people doing podcasts, but it's like, nah, this is what brings me joy. I love talking to people like yourself and whoever else I bring on. And so it's like you have to I think if anyone is watching this and they're kind of right there on the edge, just I want to say whatever you feel like you're called to do, and you know it. I feel like people know what they're supposed to do. Like you just have to feel it. You know what I mean? I'm sure you felt the same way when you started making your TikTok videos. It's like, oh, like
Yeah,
I gotta do this. You know what I mean? Like this feels so authentic to me. And so you have to just find whatever that is and go all in. You know what I mean?
a lot of people go like half in, half out, and like I do these. I like the way I go all in on things, and to people who don't have that feeling or don't know that feeling, what they want to do, it's like you really just haven't tried enough yet.
Mm,
Like you have to try the different things and learn about yourself, and not always do the like path that everyone expects of you. Um, but dude, one of the ways that helps me go all in is making like shorter time limits, like where like if I wanted to make content, it's not like this thing like, okay, now for the rest of time I'm gonna have to post every day and do all these things. Like I set these little time limits to where it's like when I first started making content, I was like, okay, for the first 3 months, like I'm gonna post every day, no matter what the feedback is, no matter how many views I get, how many likes, like, and even when I'm like quitting like smoking weed, like I'm like, okay, I don't have to stop smoking weed forever. I'm gonna stop smoking weed until August 1st, and
mm,
like that's gonna be my rule. And like you just have to commit yourself. So like discipline yourself with like shorter time limits. It doesn't have to be this forever engagement because that's when people lose it and they're like, okay, well I'll just do it this one time.
mm-hmm.
But like have that the light at the end of the tunnel of like, okay, this date, this thing, like I'll try it for this amount of months. Like if it doesn't work, I can go back to my old job. I can go back to my old friend, like whatever. You can always have that plan B. But that's one of the things that helps me, like setting a specific date and just sticking to that for sure.
Definitely giving yourself deadlines to meet and trying a bunch of different things. I like how you mentioned that because I think that's one of the things. One of the most common fears is the fear of failure,
100.
um, and just I think people also have to realize like You know, Michael Jordan failed a bunch of times. He missed a bunch of game-winning shots, but he still ended up winning 6 championships and considered one of the goats of basketball. You know what I mean? And look at Tom Brady. You know, there's a lot of things that a lot of games he's lost. You know, a lot of game-losing interceptions that he's thrown. But the guy has seven Super Bowls now. You know what I mean? And so it's just like one of those things you just got to keep hammering and keep going.
Yeah, people don't realize that's what I've learned. So one of my favorite lessons that I've learned from the book The Slight Edge, which is in my top 10, it was like what I considered the two most important keys to success. And that's the second one. The first one is consistency compounded,
Mm-hmm.
right? With something like we're saying daily, weekly, month, like just consistent. That's the only way anything's going to be meaningful. And then the second one is double your rate of failure. Like you're just not trying enough. Like people, we only see the success, especially with social media. It's so easy. Everything is glorified, right? But
Mm-hmm.
every successful person has failed their way there. And like even I always relate this to like my sales jobs. Like the best we were in our industry, we did door-to-door sales for pest control. In our industry, I was on the best team in the country. I wasn't the best, but I joined that team because they were the best in the country. And
Mm-hmm.
what I realized when I was working around people who were setting records in the industry was like, okay, yeah, they're good, they're really talented, but it's because they've done it very consistently and it's compounding, and they're failing way more than I was. Like the dudes that were getting 15 sales a day and I was getting 3, like they were getting twice, 3 times as many no's as I was getting. Like they were just failing way more
Mm-hmm.
to get the dubs, and people, that goes over people's heads. Like they don't realize.
Yeah, I love that you said that because literally life is a numbers game. You know what I mean?
For every scenario, every situation, always I agree.
I remember, I forgot where I heard this from, and it was just, I think it was like a clip that I saw either on TikTok or Instagram, and they were talking about how Michael Phelps, when he was training for the Olympics, and he, you know, that year where he won like what, 12 or whatever insane amount of gold medals that he won that
Yeah,
year.
seven,
Um, what was it?
or that might be his total. I think he has the record for like 17 or 27 total. But anyways, yeah, I remember what year you're talking about where he won every freaking race.
Exactly. But I remember like they were talking about how they would practice scenarios. Like one of the scenarios was where his goggles weren't on fully, and I thought that was
That's smart.
awesome. You know what I mean? Like, of course, like practice the things that go wrong. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that's just the key in life. Like, you just got to keep getting your reps up, keep getting your reps up, and every failure is not the end of the world. It's actually a lesson, and it's actually you could flip it into a dub if you take the lesson from it. You know what I mean?
I agree, and that's, dude. I'm glad you brought that up because um, in Stoicism they talk about this thing because everyone always talks about like positive thinking, right? Like playing mental movies in your head, like visualizing the success, right? And not thinking negatively, not like thinking of like the bad things that can happen. But that's actually the opposite of what some of the Stoics said, where they're like, you don't have to meditate on the failures, but like if you, even if you're not physically practicing them, like Michael Phelps with his goggles like messed up, even if you're just practicing things that can go wrong in your head and playing them, you don't have to start getting, I know people do this automatically and they'll start to get anxiety about it and like, oh my god, what if this happens, what if this happens. But if you use it strategically and think of those negative things that happen, you won't be as surprised when they do, when stuff
Mm-hmm.
does in your life, because when you're blindsided by something, it's going to knock you way farther off course than if you kind of expected it. You don't have to like where they say like expect the best, prepare for the worst, expect
Mm-hmm.
the best thing. Like that's so true, and you don't have to do it physically. You can play mental movies in your head of like certain conversations or whatever. And I think that's a good point. Like that's something I've used a lot too.
Absolutely. Visualizing both successes and failures, I think, is something that everyone could incorporate.
Yeah, 100%.
Let's switch gears and let's talk about the content that you're making on TikTok. I know you're talking about like a lot of different books on there.
Yeah.
Um, what was what was the one that kind of took off for you? Like that one TikTok that took off for you?
Um, where I was talking about a specific book. So my first TikTok that blew up was me doing the cheat code one. That was like it was literally like my fourth or fifth video, where I just explained how books are the biggest cheat code in the entire world.
Mm-hmm.
Because if your thoughts create your reality, then books are just hundreds of pages of the best thoughts to have ever existed on the planet, and you just literally take them and put them in your head. So that was the first one that blew up. The one where I was talking about a specific book was one of the most mind blowing books I've ever freaking read in my life, which was called The Untethered Soul,
Mm-hmm.
um, which is considered like a spiritual book. And I don't like putting those labels because I think back to myself. If I was like hearing this when I was younger, like the word spiritual even kind of like turned me off. And spirituality, that sounds like woo woo. But people don't realize that spirituality is just about you. Like it's about the human experience. It's about you. So every spiritual book, everyone should be spiritual. Everyone should learn about themselves. They should learn about how to live a good life, how to not suffer, all this stuff. But yeah, it was Untethered Soul. And what made me so mind blown by it, again, that's another book where the first 5-10 pages, the first couple of chapters, you like my mind was exploding. Um and the main reason behind that was because it just talked about how you are not your thoughts, which is hard to even, which when I first heard, I was almost like not offended by, but I was like, what are you talking about? Like, we are not our thoughts. Like, we think all our thoughts don't turn off. Obviously, it's us, it's in our head.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but our mind, but us not being our thoughts, like, we're the consciousness that's aware of our thoughts. Like, we can hear our thoughts, we can see them, but them coming in, we can't control. And it's just basically our environment, like, controlling them. Um, so, which is, it's hard to kind of explain, but I hope everyone goes and reads that book. If not the whole thing, read the first 2 chapters of the book, and it's literally called Awakening Consciousness, and it's really eye-opening.
Yeah, I've never read that book, but I listened to the audiobook once. It's
Oh,
one that I got to go back to, but I just remember it kind of reiterating what you just said is how yeah, you're not your thoughts, but also to how important it is to go within yourself and make sure that you're aware of what's circulating inside of you. You know what I mean? Because what's circulating inside of you, it's going to get projected out and it's going to be externalized, and that's going to be the reality that you experience. And Untethered Soul is definitely one of those books that, yeah, I think everyone should definitely read.
and
Um,
the importance, I'll say, I didn't say like the reason behind not identifying with your thoughts is important. The reason that's important, it talks about, the second chapter is called Your Inner Roommate, and it's talking about how your thoughts are like picturing your thoughts as a different person. And the reason identifying with your thoughts or not identifying with your thoughts is important is because you have to realize that if you're, it basically has an analogy where like if your thoughts were actually a different person, like sitting next to you in the room and was like talking to you, and those were your thoughts, it would be the worst friend you could ever ask for. Like how much your own thoughts doubt you, how much limitations they like put on you. Like that's why it's important not to listen or believe. You don't have to believe every thought that comes in your head. Like you can be aware of it, you can see it, and just be like, no, I don't believe that. Like, and that's an important like realization I had. I was like, okay, not every thought is true. It's just what is going on in my head right now.
yeah, yeah. And I think that's key, just knowing, just observing the thoughts, I mean, just, I think journaling is huge too. You just, even writing, getting those thoughts out of your head and onto paper is powerful. But let's move on to, I want to hear most impactful, what was the most impactful book that you've ever read?
So my all-time favorite, I actually just finally made a top 10. I just posted yesterday or 2 days ago like my top 10 all-time people have been asking. Number 2 was Untethered Soul, and number 1 was Think and Grow Rich.
Mm.
Just and the reason that's the most impactful for me, I've read it over 5 times. It's a book I can see myself reading literally every year for the rest of my life and getting something new out of it. Um, and it's just because that was one of the first books I read that really got me addicted to reading and personal development because it opened up my whole world about like practical things to do and practical ways to think on how to design the life you want. Um, I'm actually finding stuff out about Think and Grow Rich. So Think and Grow Rich is a shortened down version of the full book called Laws of Success, which now I read the full version. It's like 1,000 pages. It's a gnarly read. But and I don't know if you've seen this, but I actually saw this TikTok of someone who had the original version of Think and Grow Rich from like, and by the way, this book is written in like 1920 or something.
Mm,
And I don't want people to think like it's outdated or something. Like, no, humans were the same in 1920, 100 years ago as they are now. Like, social
right.
media amplifies stuff. But there was all these little lines that were taken out. It kind of reminds me of the Bible. I know the Bible, since it was written, it's been manipulated and like certain things taken out, certain things added many times over the years. And it was really cool seeing like the certain things that they took out. They took out certain things about like vibration and energies and like it was actually really interesting just seeing that. But yeah, if there was one book I think that anyone could read, whether you're religious, spiritual, atheist, whatever, if you care about success, is Think and Grow Rich for sure.
What's something that you can tell us about that book? Like, give us some gems from that book.
Dude, so the first, one of the favorite things that I still use to this day, I try every day, is like what its format was for like goal setting or achieve the amount of money you want. So I actually still have the exact like words to use with it. Um, but the main, and I'm really trying to think because there's been the last time I read that book was probably a few years ago, and there's been so many since then because now I'm like
Mm,
making up to read new books and talk about books constantly. So I'm
mm-hmm.
really
It's all good,
but
bro.
one thing a chapter that I slept on that I didn't understand the first 3 times I read it, probably just because I was young, that just went over my head was the chapter called Sex Transmutation. And I
Mm,
most important chapters that I just couldn't grasp. But basically, that chapter talks about how sexual energy is the most powerful energy and force in the world.
mm-hmm.
And you can use that energy instead of you can use that energy to produce, right? And obviously, and I'm not talking about reproduction, actually just having sex. You can transmute the sexual energy into producing the life and designing the life that you want and the success that you want. So this is one of the most important reasons that like I think it's so cool to start seeing that like all this like no fap stuff and like all this stuff start to become popularized because that's something that I don't remember ever being taught growing up. How
Mm-hmm.
like masturbating was like a normal thing when you're growing up. You're
Right.
going puberty. It's like, oh yeah, no, it's normal to do that stuff. But like, no, it's not healthy. It's like not healthy. And and you can use that energy. One of my favorite things I've learned is like instead of just even not masturbating. Like masturbating is one way to release it, but another way is people fantasizing about stuff. Like, oh,
Mm,
you start fantasizing in your head. But
mm-hmm.
another that I actually learned from The Way of the Superior Man, so it kind of like combos Think and Grow Rich and this one, is like you can actually breathe. And I use this in the gym a lot. I use it in the gym when I see like a hot girl in the gym. Instead of fantasizing or whatever, I literally like breathe that energy in, and you can like fill your whole body with the energy of just like seeing an attractive woman. It's crazy, and you
Mm.
can whole body up with it and like literally feel the energy like pulsing through your veins. So I feel like yeah, people need to realize how important sexual energy is and not releasing it and using it for your advantage to build what you want.
Yeah, that's huge. I think it's something that a lot of, men, especially, men our age, I'm 26, and I think our generation, specifically men right now who are in their early 20s all the way to the late 20s, I think we have been victims of kind of this hypersexualization, that's being promoted in social media. And you could go deep down a rabbit hole and say that's kind of like, you know, uh, the powers that be, their way of, weakening men.
Dude,
And
with all that shit that's going on right now.
was that?
I agree with all the dude. You bringing up that point, like everything that's going on right now, because there's a
Mm-hmm.
huge movement happening, especially with like Tate and all
Yes.
red pill people, whatever. But they're really opening my eyes as to what, like you said, the like over sexualization of these things is creating in men and like weakening us as men and like feminizing the masculine, right? When like masculine and feminine, it's the most beautiful like thing, and when we like balance everything out, it just is not our natural state. And I'm all for all this, like, I don't know, of the traditional masculine feminine stuff. I'm all for it.
Right.
So
Yeah, I really, he gets a lot of flack right now, but I really appreciate Andrew Tate because he's like the masculine, like he's like speaking up for a lot of, like, I think masculine men. You know what I mean? Like, because for a while there was always like, I think for a while, like, the feminist movement, and there's nothing, against, feminists. I just feel like they have been so saturated in media that it's kind of weakened the authority of masculinity. If you're asking my opinion, I that's what I think. And but
dude,
Tate, he this guy who comes out of nowhere and he's saying this, he's saying like a bunch of wild shit, but in reality, the shit that he says is it's low key true. You know what I mean?
like there's some like exaggerated points or whatever,
Yeah.
but dude, it's like he says, it's like it's not like he's saying new things. It's just different than like we've changed so much as a Western society of like equal everything. When I like equal is such a like bad word for it because it's like
Mm-hmm.
your true essence of your being. Like we do things. Some people should be better at these things. Some people should be better at these things, and it like
Mm-hmm.
perfectly connects. When everyone just wants to be the same, it's like normal sucks.
Yeah.
When everyone's the same, it sucks. So I agree with like I guess I'm just a traditional guy. I don't
Yeah.
know. Agree
Yeah.
with the like beliefs and things about masculine and feminine energy for sure.
Yeah. It's definitely a topic to be discussed in maybe a different episode, but yeah, man, he's killing it right now. I see what he's doing, and from a creator standpoint, you gotta respect it. You know what I mean?
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
and I love what you're doing as well. I've actually never read Think and Grow Rich, but you know, I'm much more of an auditory. Like I'll listen to audiobooks while I'm working out or even while I'm driving. But there is something more powerful when you actually read it and you're taking it in that way.
Dude,
What's
I honestly disagree. I can agree to an extent. I've heard
mm-hmm,
that there's some benefits to actually reading the content. There's some benefits to listening. Some benefit to doing. Some people do both. I think that's the
mm-hmm,
best. But I think the most important thing to be aware of is the self awareness, right? So if you know that about yourself, that it's easier for you to ingest the content by listening to it and doing other things. Like I can't. I'm like that. Like with an audiobook, I can't just sit in my room and like listen to an audiobook
mm-hmm,
because it will start like wandering off. I have to be walking on a walk or doing the dishes or
mm-hmm,
cleaning my while I listen, and that kind of keeps me in like the flow, right? But yeah, for people that are listening, a lot of people ask me like, "Oh, I just hate reading. I like listening to audiobooks." Like, dude, listen to the audiobooks then. You don't have to read it. Like, you can
mm-hmm,
do it as long as you're ingesting that information and getting it into your head. That's all
mm-hmm.
that. So whatever works best for you, like stick with that.
Yeah. No, I agree. Um, what a How did you grow your TikTok? You just started posting consistently?
Consistency, studying what was working, kind of finding my own um like unique like kind of look. I
Mm-hmm.
like um right when I got my iPhone 13, I realized that I got it just for the cinematic mode. I love
Mm-hmm.
the always portrait mode where it blurs the background, but cinematic where it blurs during video, blurs the background. But I kind of found my style where I do like the 3x zoom with the like far back with that. So I kind of found my
Mm-hmm.
own. And then yeah, just focus talking about things I love. I'm super passionate about. It's always just an energy. People can always
Yeah.
feel that like what you're trying to provide, your intentions. Um, I had only pure intentions to just help people think like how I thought, or like just share the information that I've learned from the smartest people in the world. So it was really easy for me to produce content. But yeah, I didn't do anything crazy. A lot of people talk about posting 4 to 6 times a day. I think that's awesome. If you can do that, if you have like a team to, I can't consistently do that.
That's
I want to
hard.
I want to work up to it. Um, but dude, I just focused on 1 to 2 a day
Mm-hmm.
and just focused on quality, focused on providing value, and it started catching. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It just sounds like, yeah, it just sounds like consistency and just being passionate about what you do. I think that's the formula, really. I mean, I
Yeah,
think anyone who's made it, even just a little bit, they will tell you that. It's just follow your passion, be passionate about what you love and what you do, and just be consistent and, hone in on that craft and just keep working at it. And I think it'll become a lifestyle, and then, soon enough, you'll somehow, flip that to where it's providing for you.
yeah. You have to do it. The last thing, like you have to do it yourself too, because if you do it for it's good to like do it for other people as in like, oh, I want to share this with other people to help other people, but you can't have that mindset when it comes to the attention and the views you get, because then it becomes like this outside validation that you need. Whereas like I knew I was gonna post no matter what. I knew I've learned these cool things that I want to share that are gonna be valuable to someone. And it was like I don't care if I get 20 views. I don't care if I get a million views. It's like I'm gonna stick to this. I love talking about this. I know it's gonna work, and you just don't quit no matter what like the feedback was. And I was lucky to have really I was ready once the followers started coming. I was ready to you hear all these people talk about all the negativity and the trolls and whatever, which there's been some inevitably, but
Mm-hmm.
I've had a super positive community, just like.
Mm,
And again, I think it's just the vibes, it's just the feelings,
yeah,
like everyone's been super cool, and so I haven't really dealt with too much of that. Been
that's
blessed.
awesome.
Yeah,
And that's one of the beauties of TikTok. Like it'll take your content and put it with the right audience, which is
that is
awesome.
that is true. They're good at that.
You know what, Drew? We're at the tail end of the pod here. I just want to kind of wrap it up. I got like 3 questions that I ask every guest at the end of every podcast.
That
Um, so the first one is going to be, um, what do you define as love?
I've never been asked that question. I like that question. What do I define as love? Um, I think it. I think it all starts with yourself, and I think it always comes back for me. Like the first things that pop into my head, it always comes back to gratitude. And like when you're grateful for yourself, and you're grateful for living this life, and you're grateful for your family and wherever you grow up, no matter the situation, like there's always stuff to be grateful for. You start to love yourself. And when you start to love yourself, you start to love the world and this life. So, like, defining love, that's a hard question. I don't know. But
There's no right answer.
yeah, I still thank you. I think the first step, if people don't have a lot of love in their life, is focusing on loving yourself, which comes from being grateful for yourself and being grateful for everything you have.
Awesome. I love that answer. And then the second one's going to be, what do you define as success?
Dude, It's basically what I kind of mentioned at the beginning of like changing your mindset on wealth, because a lot of people, the first thing they think with success is money. But when you think of real wealth, I completely agree with what I said earlier, as in the three F's. I think true success is family and friends, fitness, and freedom. And if you can, that little trilogy, if you can align those, then you will be successful, you will be happy, and you'll be fulfilled like in your life.
Family, friends, and freedom.
And fitness.
And fitness, yes. That's super important, actually. And then final one is what is the purpose to life? If you think there is one.
Questions. You didn't tell me they were this deep. No, yeah, the purpose of life, dude. It's I think the purpose of life is realizing it's like it's all these spiritual books have really like opened me up to like the purpose of life, and realizing the yin and yang, the balance, um and realizing that the suffering is essential for the like peace and the bliss, and like we're always going to have the ups and downs, and to be so grateful for the ups, to be so grateful for the downs. um and it's always about progression as humans. Growth is so important. When you're stagnant, that's when you're the most depressed, that's when you're the most unfulfilled. So always striving for things that go back to the success thing, right? Striving for better relationships, the family, friends, better health, better fitness, and then more freedom. um I get, yeah, that's a I guess that's my answer.
Yeah, there's no right answer. I love answer. I love asking these questions to my
Yeah,
guests because it's like every single answer has been different, and there's literally haven't been one answer that. I mean, they have similarities, but it's all been completely different,
dude,
and I love
those
that because I think people need to hear all that.
I think I'm gonna start asking those questions more often, just in my personal life, because I think it's something we all gotta get tired of. We all get tired of small talk. It's important. Small talk's important to like get to know someone, whatever. But like those those are some of the most fulfilling times in your life. Having those deep conversations
Hmm.
about like just what life means, what the afterlife is, what success is. I think those are all huge. Love, like that was such a good one. But yeah, no, thank you for those questions. Honestly,
Absolutely, man. Thank you for your, just being willing to be the guest. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. I
yeah,
absolutely love what you're doing, brother.
I love what you're doing.
Um,
Until you're authentic, you're genuine. I like it.
Thank you, Drew. Before we sign off here, what are you working on?
Um, I'm actually gonna. I'm like building this. I don't want to build like this full like course thing, but I want to build. A lot of people have been asking for me to just build like my next thing. I'm gonna build a freaking all my favorite points from like my top 50 books on on a few different categories, just like the health, wealth, love, happiness, and kind of just put all the information that I have into one spot to
Hmm.
really serve people the best. So that I'm assuming that's probably going to take like a month or two to build. But right now I'm just going to focus on playing it by ear,
Yeah,
focus on the process, focus on keep posting content, um, keep making money moves.
yeah.
What I'm going to do.
I love it, man.
Heck yeah.
And where can people find you?
Drew X Ford on every social. I mostly Instagram and TikTok. Drew X
Love it.
Ford.
Love it. Well, thank you so much, brother.